Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by...
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Hi, and welcome to Popcorn Psychology. So in kicking off Pride Month, we're actually going to be talking about the movie Brokeback Mountain today. For anyone who hasn't seen it, Brokeback Mountain is about two men, played by Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, who are cowboys in the 60s. The movie kind of covers from like the 60s through, I think, probably like the late 70s, early 80s. And these are two men who fall in love while ranching together. And then you kind of watch them over the course of their life as they try to be straight and know that they are actually not, that they are at least attracted to men and that they are in love with each other. And so you kind of watch the tragedy that is them never being able to be who they truly are. So joining us today in this episode is Patrick Serrano. I'll have you introduce yourself, Patrick.
Yeah, so excited to be here. I'm Patrick Serrano. I host a podcast about Lifetime movies, so it's a nice change of pace to watch a real, good movie.
A real movie.
I'm very excited to talk about Brokeback Mountain, and I guess I'm representing the gays here for Pride Month, so happy Pride, all you gays. And for anyone wondering if Ben is as cute as his accent, I can confirm he is a 10 out of 10.
Oh.
I will graciously accept the compliment. Thank you, good sir.
I was going to say, Ben, I can't quit you.
Great. And so
I can't quit you either, Patrick.
Oh, thanks.
And I don't know if you said, but your podcast is called Lifetime Uncorked. So if anyone is looking for that after listening to that, that's where they can find it.
Yes, lifetimeuncorked.com, Lifetime Uncorked at all the places you do social media. And yeah, we just talk about Lifetime movies with the guys from Deck the Hallmark podcast, if anyone knows that one. I explain Lifetime movies to people who haven't seen them, and that's what I do. So I love this podcast because you get the explanation out right at the beginning, and it's very concise. So it's like, this is the plot of the movie, and now let's deep dive into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about basically the impact of being gay or being non-straight in a homophobic time. I mean, you could argue that we are still currently living in a homophobic time, so I don't want to be one of those stupid people who pretends that we're past all this now. We're not. But in the time period that this movie is set, kind of the crux of the movie is that these two men are living in a time that is extremely homophobic. And one thing I want us to own up the top is that even in our world, the mental health clinician world, homosexuality was still a diagnosable mental illness until the 70s. And so we, as in mental health clinicians, we also played a part in othering homosexual people and in giving people an excuse to treat them like they were sick because we also labeled them as sick. So thankfully, it hasn't been in the DSM or diagnostic manual in 50 years but we are also part of the problem. So I just wanted to locate us in that at the start of this.
We sure were. Yeah, it was removed by DSM-3, I believe.
Okay.
We, as a profession, were labeling people who just want to live their lives as somebody who has a mental illness and allowing the greater community at whole to align with that. And that is definitely a great tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that long ago, right? I mean, 50 years, wouldn't some of your professors or people who taught you in college and stuff have experience or come up in that time period, right?
Oh, for sure. Oh, for
Absolutely.
sure.
That's just wild that, someone who you're having teach you about psychology, had to make that shift, whether it's they agreed with it or not. It's interesting to think that, medical professionals were really considering it as a mental illness.
Being homosexual was removed from the DSM. And I'm very glad that it's been taken out because as we covered, it's just, it's absolutely unfair to assume that because of someone's sexual identity, they are ill.
Mm-hmm.
They're not.
And it also gave a lot of fuel to the fire to the conversion therapy community, which if you want to hear us really rip that apart in our But I'm a Cheerleader episode from a few years ago, we talk at length about that stuff because that movie involves a lot of quote unquote therapy, even though it is very much not so.
And that movie just covers the tame end of it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed.
There's shame based in the conversion of it there, but sometimes it involves pretty significant pain and aversive stimuli introduced, kind of like A Clockwork Orange, where they try to make people sick, physically ill when they see images of any type of gay romance. And that's just so evil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to put it into context a little bit more, I have someone that I work with who had an experience that is similar to conversion therapy. Like we are not, and this person is not necessarily like they're not 60. They're pretty young. They're pretty young, and they grew up further south in the country. And that was something that was still happening. So also, we're not talking about something that happened 30 years ago. We're talking about something that was just maybe
people are still doing it.
I say people are still doing it. It finally got, maybe by the state of California, got ruled as like illegal to do, is like something that you're not allowed to do anymore in any context, which has not been the case in every state. Like it's still, there still isn't any legal documentation that goes along with that, except for in the state of California, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but I think that is right.
And
over at Lifetime, they do conversion therapy movies all the time. So, you know, I just saw one not a couple of years ago where, you know, the parents thought that they were putting their daughter into this conversion therapy for like her benefit. And it really comes down to like the parenting and like what your experience is, because I'm on the flip side of conversion therapy. I went to therapy as like affirmation therapy when I was a child. My parents put me in because I played with dolls like Barbies and stuff like that. And my parents put me into like child therapy to just like make sure that I was cool with that and like it was all good and like accepting of myself. So I had the reverse of like a conversion. It was just like, yay, I'm gay, you know, type of thing.
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So seeing stuff like this movie, it's like so hard for me to imagine because that wasn't my experience at all, thankfully. But I still experienced a lot of shame, mostly with like sex shame, like of like exploring myself, like when I was like a middle schooler or whatever. There's just like a lot of shame associated with that because it's so different, and no one's teaching you anything about gay sex in school or anywhere. You're just basically learning it from the internet, which is not a good place to be if you're a minor. But yeah, that's where you have to go to learn these things. So I don't know. I felt a lot for the boys in this movie because, you know, they just had that connection and they couldn't, they explored it on Brokeback Mountain, but they can't go further than that. So it was just so heartbreaking to see, and probably still happens, you know, all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And we can jump into it. So basically the main characters, so hopefully we will say their names more than we'll say their actors' names, but I can confirm nor deny that, as that is in the future. But so we have Ennis and we have Jack. And I think what I noticed like pretty quickly in watching this movie is how different they are. I think their personalities are just pretty different, but also I think in the way that they approach each other and approach their queerness, I think is very different and says a lot about who they are. And so if we want to jump into like Ennis first, I think what I noticed is he's so, even like the way he holds his face, like his mouth, it's like so guarded and like kind of like puckered. And so he's in a protective kind of closed off stance all the time. And I think as we learn more about his character, that makes a lot of sense, because I think what we also learn right away or pretty early about him is that his parents died. And I think, was it a car accident?
No.
He said something about them like having to go past a curve at 43 miles per hour. Kind of missed it, and I didn't
If it was
rewind
a Lifetime
it.
movie, it would definitely be a car accident. Just want to clarify that. But so I'm not a good source here to tell you.
But
all I remember is that his mom died some kind of way when he was younger, maybe, and then his dad and his sister died.
Okay.
Also, so maybe it wasn't a car accident. I can't quite place it. And then he was just by himself and like on his own.
Well, he said his brother and his sister pretty much raised him from a pretty young age. And then he only completed 1 year of high school because he had to drop out and start working pretty young. And then both of his, I think, siblings kind of just grew up, like they got married and things like that. And so he says by 19, he was totally on his own with like 1 year of high school education. And so he's lived a life of a lot of having to grow up really quickly, I guess, and having to really work really hard. And he even makes the point, like towards the end of the movie to Jack, of like, you don't know what it's like to always be poor. Like you have forgotten what it's like to have to work and have to prioritize your survival in a resource oriented way your whole life. Not just like being gay is your only struggle. Like being poor is my biggest struggle, and being gay is kind of after that.
It was such a powerful and sad scene. Mm-hmm. To see Ennis call him right out on that, like, you've gotten money now. Mm-hmm. You aren't living a struggle. You aren't living in a rundown old farmhouse anymore. Like I grew up, or like you grew up in. You have done well. You have lost touch.
I think also something I noticed so much about Ennis, I think because of that life that he's lived, he's so, I think, scared. I think I wrote that down in my notes, like how scared he is all the time of, I feel like, everything. I mean, what has he been, Hannah? What's the magic word that we always talk about on the show?
He's been traumatized.
He's been traumatized. And I think he's been traumatized in ways that Jack hasn't. You know, he's been traumatized by living in poverty. He's been traumatized by being orphaned at a young age. Who knows what it was like being raised by your siblings at that time? And then, you know, having to be on his own, truly on his own since so young. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's had to like be homeless at certain times in his life. You know, he's gone through a lot, I think, by the time we meet him in this movie.
Yeah, I feel like that's accurate. I also feel like some of the ways that he presents just kind of in general, like his affect is pretty flat. So when we talk about affect, it is just the way that whether or not your voice kind of moves up and down, that's a part of it. So being flat or having a flat affect is when it doesn't really change. Like his tone of voice doesn't really change. He has some
expressions. His
facial expression doesn't really change. And even when he does experience emotions, it's very intense. It's very intense. Like it's only extreme, which really made me think of someone who's experienced a lot of trauma. It's like having a trauma response. And so there isn't any middle. When something happens, it's so overwhelming. And I mean, also when those things happen, there is also something huge going on. Like when he has to, when he finds out that Jake has passed or been murdered. And when he sees him after 4 years, and they see each other and it's like he can't hold, like, even though I think those were positive feelings, it just like, it's so like, I feel like we didn't see Jack act in the same way.
Something I talk about a lot with clients is there's this concept in therapy and more specifically like dialectical behavioral therapy of like, you have like your emotion mind and you have your logic mind.
Yeah.
And your emotion mind is like your thoughts, your feelings, your symptoms, your dreams, your hopes, blah, blah. And your logic mind is like, I got to go to work. I got to pay the bills. I can't punch someone in the face. Like your logic mind is sort of your adult, quote unquote, self. A lot of adults really like to live in their logic mind and pretend like they don't have an emotion mind. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you're identifying, Hannah, is that Ennis is so hard trying to abide by his logic mind. He's trying to be so in that just to get through life. Like he even has that quote of, I'm making a living is all I can live for now. Or like, that's all I have.
All I have time for. All I have time for.
And just I'm stuck. And so I think he's just trying to get along and be so in his logic mind that he's trying to shut down his emotion mind. And the problem with that, what I tell clients all the time is, baby, like eventually your emotion mind is going to pop and it's going to explode on you if you don't learn how to integrate that more into your logical self. And so exactly what you're saying, Hannah, like when he's waiting for Jack to show up the first time, once they've like gotten married, he's being so obvious. Like his leg is shaking. He's like staring out the window. He's drinking a bunch. He's chain smoking. Looks like an anxious, nervous, but like anticipatory nerves kid. And then as soon as he shows up, you're right. He, as someone who's so anxious about or scared of being seen as gay, he makes out with him in a pretty public space to the point that like almost finds them like literally 30 seconds into Jack showing up.
Yeah. They are like devouring each other, like so hard. And I think I read somewhere that the actors like almost broke Jake Gyllenhaal's nose. Like they were just like the impact of the kiss was just so hard. But
wow.
you know, this is like the hot like passion moments that in gay cinema we're not really getting at this time. This movie is like so good. I mean, it's so sad, but it's also to see that type of passion on film. Like most of the movies that predate this are about the AIDS crisis or about coming out or you know, those type of stories. We don't really get to see like a love story with passion and like they are holding so much inside and like you know, for the times. But there's also a lot of love there, even though they never say I love you in the movie.
I know.
Yeah.
So sad, but
it is.
I think that Ennis does have these like bursts of emotions, and it can be a little scary for me. Not a psychologist, just you know, a normal girl working in the world. Like when he freaks out on Alma when she's doing the dishes at, I forget, like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, like, he can't control himself because like, you know, it's not the part where she calls him Jack Nasty, which is my favorite, by the way.
It felt like, very camp, kind of.
It's like Janet Jackson, like, you know, Jack Nasty if you nasty. Love that. But no, she's like, you know, saying like, I know, like I put the note on the fishing rod and that's when I knew that y'all be doing gay stuff. And he just like freaks out on her. Like he can't. He can't control himself. It was very scary, and like I was worried for Michelle Williams.
Yeah, like that. I mean, we do see his anger throughout the movie because something we have also talked about a number of times on this show in different episodes is that anger is the only emotion men are allowed to have societally, or at least in our society. And so
there's three.
What's the other two? Happiness and horniness?
Yep. Four. Hungry.
Oh, okay. Which is a body feeling. That's what I tell little kids. That's a body feeling.
I mean, we see that illustrated in this movie, though. Like their display of only a few emotions that they're comfortable with when they're not acting strange are happiness, horniness, and hunger. Those are the three that they are like actually able to show, and anger.
What about hangry? Is hangry an emotion?
I mean, according to Snickers commercials, if I can turn into Betty White, then
yes, very powerful.
Cool. I needed to ask the professionals, so I'm so glad that you guys are here for me for the hard-hitting questions.
Exactly.
If I were to bring my wife in, she would absolutely say that hangry is an emotion, and I am susceptible to it.
Yeah, I mean, that scene with Michelle Williams with Alma, that felt, even though we've seen his anger many times, like in the movie, that felt like the most out of character for him, in that I feel like he's always tried his best. I don't know how this is going to sound, but tried his best to like respect her kind of as like the woman in his life. And so for him to be that aggressive towards her, like so like terrifying on a holiday where his kids are in the house, I think that is probably the closest we get to like a true trauma reaction, like you were saying, Hannah, from him. Like he can't abide the terror that comes from anyone saying out loud, "You are gay," and so I think he can't help himself but to try to shut her down by any means necessary.
He can't. So you know, in this topic, you know, certified trauma therapist here. The things that we see is. Hannah, you talked about affect. When we talk about affect and emotion go together. Emotion is the inward expression of emotion, and affect is the biological outward expression of an emotion. It is not something that can be negotiated with. So the simple way I had one training put it is that emotion is biography and affect is biology. Oh. People have outward displays of emotion that we can pick up on because we need to be able to understand the emotional state of others in our tribe and others that we are interacting with to know if we are interacting with someone who is regulated or dysregulated, because the human brain, with its binary nature of safe or not safe, and having the corresponding physical structures live on different sides of the brain. The emotion mind that Brittany is talking about lives on the right side of your brain, and in your limbic system with your amygdala, and the logic part lives on the left side. And those two don't talk to each other really well. There is a structure in the brain called the corpus callosum that goes in between the two sides of the brain to facilitate communication between the two. But there is brain scans that show physical evidence, and this was work done by Bessel van der Kolk a long time ago, that shows that when people are distressed, they stop having a lot of function, a lot of brain activity in their prefrontal cortex, and that function is taken over by the amygdala. So the power decreases in the left side of your brain and increases in the right side of your brain. So when we see Ennis flip like that, we are seeing, yes, a trauma reaction. He is scared for his life.
Yeah.
He is scared for his life in that moment, and he is scared for his life, his entire life. He learned at a young age exactly what can happen and how evil people can be towards gay men at this time and present day. It's not like it went away, but particularly bad in the American West at this point in time, to see how scary it can get and how much need there is for a survival response of being restricted, being within a certain box that you can identify with outwardly, so people can't read him. He's always the same. He's always shut down. I think that it would be a function of his freeze part. He learned it is unsafe to express myself in a way that is authentic to me. Therefore, I have to shut all of this down in order to be safe.
Because what you're referencing, Ben, which I think is kind of like the fork in the road between Jack and Ennis and their experiences, is that when Ennis was really young, there were two ranchers, older ranchers in his community, in his hometown, that were pretty much, it sounds like, living together as, you know, two gay men, and that the community found out and they tortured them to death. And not only that, but then Ennis's father made a point of walking him and his brother down to that dead body and showing it to him. And they show it in the movie too. And it's like really graphic, and basically communicating to him, like, this is what happens if you're gay, if you act. I'm sure he used a very different word than that, but, you know, and so Ennis was confronted. I mean, seeing a dead body, period, is traumatizing when you are that little. And then seeing a dead body of someone who was murdered for something that you might already be noticing about yourself.
Well, I mean, not just murdered, Brittany. I mean, tortured.
Like tortured to death.
He was beaten with a tire iron and then dragged by a rope by his penis until it came off.
Yeah,
and
we're going to put a trigger warning before this.
Yeah, we are.
Well,
I was just thinking the same thing.
Of course we are, but like he's dragged until it gets pulled off and bled to death from blood loss from that. Because there's, you know, if you castrate someone, they're going to die if you don't stop the blood.
Absolutely. And the other piece that I was thinking about in terms of, like, if his dad is doing shit like that, taking him to see something when he is barely at an age where, in terms of child development, even being able to understand death and be able to conceptualize it for yourself, they're not even there yet. I think he was 8, right?
I think 8 or 9.
8 or 9. So like just past that point of where he even has any understanding of what death is. So not only, and that's just child development. Like, there's nothing to do with anything else. Like, it just has to do with his brain and where we are in terms of when we're that age. So I can only imagine what kind of comments he got, or what kind of the way that he was probably so specifically shut down by his father, having any kind of emotion. If he's bringing him to this when he is 8, he has no awareness or no awareness of what is, I mean, fuck, I don't even want to say appropriate, because we know that's fucked. Yeah, like that's,
Well, and he also
it's appropriate to him. It's appropriate to the dad. The dad, I mean, the subtext there is that he got messaging his whole life that if you're gay, you're dead.
Yeah. And he even said, like, my dad was probably one of them who did it, you know?
Oh, he does say that.
Which also communicates what his dad was like. And I just think, I mean, like, you're right, Ben, in that for Dad, this was probably a rite of passage, you know, of like, this is how we're going to instill masculinity in you, like the standard of masculinity, by creating the outlier parameter.
Well, not just that, like that too, but also establishing in-group versus out-group and the consequences of being in the out-group.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing it back to like the world we live in, like this kind of representation of the man, you know, being terribly murdered, like something that we probably all can remember when we were sort of this age was like Matthew Shepard, like getting murdered. Like I think we were all probably about the same age, like 9 to like 12-ish. And that was like very traumatic. I remember me, not that I'm going to be like punching a wall or something, but you know, you know that you're kind of having gay feelings or feeling those things, and you see that what happened to Matthew Shepard being tied to a fence and all that stuff. So, like as a nation, we all kind of went through that with him, and that wasn't terribly long ago. You know, I mean,
no.
And the message there is like he was killed because he was gay. And then any gay person would probably feel like, well, shit, I'm gay. I'm going to be murdered too, I guess. And that's a lot of what was in media around this time as well. Like, you know, with, what's that show about the dead people, 6 Feet Under? The David character, like there's all these like characters that were gay, like getting like hate crimed and just like a very 90s thing. So I can see how it would be, especially if it's your father, you know, showing you all this stuff. Like, that's terrible.
Well, there's still, I mean, that messaging that happens today that, you know, gets passed down from parent to child, unfortunately, of like, I mean, there's still like boys don't play with dolls, girls don't play with trucks, you know, like there's still like, even though I think Target took down due to public outrage, like the designation of these are girls stuff and these are boy stuff, but it's still very specifically delineated in like the Target stores of like, these are all the things obviously for a quote unquote girl's bedroom. And these are all things for a quote unquote boy's bedroom. And those things don't mix. Like we still gender everything, which always communicates there's a way you should be behaving if you want to be accepted.
And there's only two options.
I'm hoping that it becomes more fluid, but yeah, I definitely can relate to that. And what's interesting, talking about the parents, Jack's mom seemed to like know that he was gay the whole time at the end there.
Yeah, it did give me a lot of insight into kind of because Jack is sort of like the foil to Ennis. Jack is very like, we could do it. Like we could live together. And it does make me wonder kind of what you're saying, Patrick, in that last scene, we got a little window into what his parents were like. We saw that I think both of his parents obviously knew because they made that whole little monologue about the dad gave about Jack bringing home men to like, or bringing home someone to run the ranch.
He's a dreamer. He's got big ideas, like coded gay words.
Yeah.
Light in the loafers.
Yeah. Yep. And then, with the mom kind of giving him like being like, you can see his room if you want. I'll pack the shirt up for you. Like, it does make me wonder what messaging Jack also got in a more positive way from his mom, or more of an accepting way from his mom, but still in the way, like, which is very typical of the time period of she might like passively support, but she's not going to actively challenge her husband.
I think that both parents were showing, I mean, dad had like a scowl on his face, but he affectually was not accepting of it, but he wasn't willing to go so far as to condemn. And you could see that. I think that his parents were the personification of don't ask, don't tell mentality. That, you know, like,
yeah,
that his parents would have been perfectly fine with like the couple that got murdered of two guys ranching together, as long as it outwardly stayed two guys ranching together. They were business partners that lived together. It would have been fine. Dad was obviously like, he knew better, but we were just going to shut that right down, and we're going to, nope, we're going to say, you know.
Which isn't necessarily better. I mean, because then you can't really be your authentic self with your parents. I mean, you want to have that connection as an adult person to your adult parents and have that relationship. So I don't think Jack or Ennis get to have any of those type of relationships, you know, so they don't get to have that love from their parents.
And so much of the conflict between them are these opposing ideologies, if I'm going to put it like that, of just Ennis having lived through the reality of what can truly the worst thing that can happen if you are outed, and Jack still having, I guess, what I would call maybe like naivete about it. And him, like the continued arguments they have within this movie is, we could do it. Like Jack kind of saying to Ennis, like, we could do it. We could live together, but you won't let us. And Ennis being like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Like, you are asking us to risk our lives and now to risk maybe our family's lives. And he does kind of say, I don't know if he outright ever says it, but like, it's not safe. And I can't remember the words specifically that he uses, but wrong place. Oh, he says wrong place, wrong time, we're dead. And if you can't fix it, you have to stand it. And so Ennis has already kind of decided what he needs to do to live, like that repression we've been talking about. And Jack, I think he's more maybe naturally optimistic, but also not traumatized the way that Ennis is. And so he can kind of see the future. Because also when you've gone through trauma, like severe trauma, you can't really feel or see the future. Or you can't feel or see a future that is hopeful, if you can at all. And so, I've worked with kids who have been traumatized and they cannot visualize a future. Like they're like, there is no future for me. Yeah. And so I think kind of psychologically, since Jack doesn't have that, like doesn't have that trauma history that Ennis does, he can see the future in a way that maybe Ennis can't even see the future. Or like there's only one future and it's torturous death.
Think about the safety that they learned versus look at the ACEs study and what it would say about these two is that Ennis is traumatized at a young age and learned very, very openly how much danger he is in if he lives that life. And Jack has this bastion of home, of land that he has parents who maybe aren't openly accepting, but they're also not openly condemning and have expressed there's a safe zone at their ranch in Lightning Flats that he could come back to ranch. They can live however they want because they'll be safe on their land. That is like the underlying ethos of his decision making is that no matter what, we can just go back to Lightning Flat and live safely on our land because he has that.
That's true. He has the comfort of also like inherited, we can think of it as inherited wealth, of where he knows that even if his whole life fell apart, even if he, was found about being gay and maybe like Lorene left him and lost his kid, like he could still go to his parents' house and live there forever.
And Ennis does not have that. Ennis has to assimilate into the community. He has to survive and he has to be able to do it in the hypermasculine ways that he knows how, using the skills that he has. And the only way he can blend into that world is to be this nothing. This emotional, conversational nothing that he's learned he has to use his freeze part and engage the freeze part of his personality that shuts down every ounce of the warm person he is and just shows up and goes and does cowboy things. He's got to go to a roundup. Yeah. Like even his daughter, like he's so flat when he's telling her that they can go find another cowboy so he can go to her wedding. He's so flat and restricted with it that until he makes the comment, she's ready to hear him turn her down and not surprised by it.
Yeah.
It's clear he lives in a frozen compartment of his personality.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, Ben.
Oh, no, just because he has to. And Jack doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even when it really makes me think of when they have the first kind of conversation that they have, Jack says to him, "That's the most I've ever heard you talk." And Ennis says back to him, "That's probably the most I've talked in 2 weeks."
Or 2 years.
Or 2 years. That's what it is. So like, also like that's, I think it was kind of like cute and like funny that like they could have that conversation, but the truth of that, not talking to anyone for 2 years that's the most words. It was like maybe 2.5 sentences. I feel like that really gives a good indication, Ben, of what you're talking about in terms of his personality being in freeze mode.
And him choosing to be so socially isolated. I mean, he spends what I assume is the rest of his life in a trailer out in the middle of nowhere, doing work that's also very isolated, you know, where he's like on large scapes of land. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's developed a bit of alcoholism. Like, we see him drink, whenever we see him drinking in the movie, he always has a few empties around him. It's never like he's just having a beer. There's always like, it always looks like he's been drinking when we observe him in the movie. And honestly, like, it's kind of surprising he even gets that second girlfriend, Cassie, I think is her name. And I only think that's because she's really gregarious and she chases him. Like, she comes up to him. She's like, you'll dance with me. Like, I think if she hadn't always been maybe approaching him, they wouldn't have happened at all. And he even kind of does like the 70s version of ghosting her eventually.
Right. And can we just take a moment to acknowledge that blonde Linda Cardellini worked?
I was...
You know who didn't work? Blonde Anne Hathaway. I'm sorry to say this.
No, it did not.
You know, on Beyonce's internet, but like, you know, that blonde hair on Anne Hathaway. Oof, not too much.
Nope, but it worked on Linda Cardellini. But you know, it did work on Anne Hathaway.
What?
Just the Catwoman suit.
Come on.
Oh my God.
It worked.
It's such a cast of like young up and comers for like 2006, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like everybody. I was like, and they almost have been babies.
They were so young. I remember thinking they were so old, but they look so young.
So young. All of them.
Kate Mara looked like a child.
Well, she probably was.
Yeah, I think
she's
that
playing
might have been her
19-year-old.
first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And little Anne Hathaway, Anne Hathaway, Anna Faris, David Harbour, like all these little, like, even like the small like throwaway parts were like people that we are so well known now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
With Ennis, I mean, it's just I feel like my sigh is just like he's so. I feel like it was an interesting story choice that he's the one that lives of the two of them, you know, because he's the more, I guess, shut down of the two. I didn't read the short story that it's based on, but I would be interested in if it was done, like what narrative it was done in, like if it was done in the narrative of one of them, like a first person, or if it was in like a third person. I don't know if any of you guys have read it.
No, I haven't.
I feel like I did, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
So something I can tell you about, I haven't read it, but I think the thing that I want to draw a parallel to between the two of them is that because they learn the world differently, we see them engage with challenge in different ways. So when people are dealing with stressors, we have what's called a window of tolerance. We have a top parameter and a bottom parameter of what we can deal with. And when something exceeds our window of tolerance and it feels like we have a chance that we can win, we enter hyperarousal states where you enter fight. And the hyperarousal side of things, when you feel like you can win or you have a chance. And during those states that you can fight or you can flee. But when we see people, and that's Jack, everything that Jack encounters, he believes he has a chance. His base understanding is I can beat the world. And Ennis has the opposite. Ennis has given up hope. He learned a long time ago that this is how it ends. And much like the predator versus prey thing, where you see lion grab hold of a gazelle and you know that gazelle is not dead, but it drops like a sack of potatoes as the lion suffocates it to death, because they don't break their neck, they don't bleed them, they suffocate them. It's fucked up. But it is. But you watch that gazelle, and once the lion gets hold of its neck, it dissociates. Pop, gone, drops like a sack of potatoes, but it's still alive. Ennis does the same thing. When he activates his hypo arousal part, or less than, because he does not think he can beat the world. He knows the world will beat him if the world corners him, and he will lose. So he checks into fawn and he checks into freeze. Fawn is when you make yourself available to appease the tormentors. And that is absolutely where Ennis lives. He shuts himself down and he appeases by being a chameleon to blend in with the other men, the other hyper masculine, hyper straight men. And the only time he really explodes is in the way that men are conditioned to be able to explode, which is he picks fights in this movie over and over again, like almost after every kind of stressor, like after
what is it like when he picks a fight with that guy? Was it after the Alma thing? Was it after like the Thanksgiving thing where he goes and
directly after?
Yeah.
Like, he's still raging and like goes and fights someone in traffic, which, you know, I would love to do that one day. Just like, you know, get out of my car, just punch somebody. Man, the road rage in me was like, that must have felt good. But then he gets his ass beat. So,
and after that, check it out. This reinforces my point. Yes, we see him burst into fight, right? But once he gets knocked down, he does not continue to fight. He just says, damn it, and enters a freeze state where he dissociates and checks out from the beating he's taking on his ribs.
Yeah.
Because the world will beat you. You can't win. He struggles against it because we all do. But once he reaches the point where he gets the reinforcement of you can't win, he goes into a hypoarousal state, dissociates, and shuts down.
And what makes me so sad about that too is that when he finally kind of relaxes, like in those moments with Jack when they're on Brokeback Mountain and they're camping and fishing and whatnot, or pretending to, he's so tender and loving. Like they're so tender and loving towards each other. But they do make a point, like in the scene where Jack's fallen asleep standing up, like he's the one who comes up behind him and wraps his arms around him. Like he's very, when his little girls are very young, like he's very tender with them. Like he has I think his core self, his authentic self is very like caregiving and tender and loving. And so what's so tragic about all this too, is if you were watching Ennis from an outside perspective, you would think he's a pretty violent, aggressive guy. Like when the 4th of July, how he picks that fight, which he did not have to do, like he makes a fight. And you can see Alma be like, you are making this worse for me. By going up there now, she's like dragging these 2 babies around, like while she's being embarrassed and like probably freaked out. And so it's a shame that when we see him in these pocket moments, when he's getting to really be more of himself, that isn't who he is, that angry person. And most people I work with who are quote unquote angry people, I always say that anger is it's a blanket feeling. Like there's usually another feeling going on underneath it, or it's sort of a blanket presentation of something else, like either your truer self, or it's like you're saying, Ben, it's a defense mechanism, or the only way you can have feelings.
Did anybody else in that fireworks scene want Katy Perry firework to just start popping off?
I wanted something to happen. I was like, oh no.
Like, where's that super cut of like, baby, you're a firework?
I mean, you just inspired somebody to do it and they're going to send it to you now.
I can't wait. Please send it to me at Patrick Miguel.
Go internet for the win.
But I didn't know, is there anything else about Ennis we want to specifically talk about? Because I'm about to shift it to Jack.
Nope, but we should probably take a break before we do that.
Okay, so we're back. So with Jack, like we've been kind of talking about him here and there. He is this more optimistic person. He's like also something I noticed right away is he's just more silly and like vulnerable and like open than Ennis. Like in that one scene when they're like just chit-chatting by the fire, he starts like pretending what it's like to be like a rodeo person. Like he is very, just like I said, more emotive and more, he's just less guarded. And he comes out in these small ways in his personality, but then I think in these really hopeful ways. I mean, that's why he still thinks that they can make it.
He's been cared for. He's safe.
Yeah.
He has a safe understanding that the world is safe, that parents are safe, that you can grow and actualize in the world and be supported in doing so. It's not conditional. He does not believe love is conditional. He learns the hard way, and that's part of his tragedy.
Yeah.
What does that mean, love is conditional? Like, wait, huh?
That Ennis has learned you can only get love if you are a straight male who conforms to societal standards. Whereas Jack has been given support by his parents, even if it's not great. They didn't condemn him for his sexuality or shut him down. He was given support and love and realized that his parents are going to love him no matter what. So he doesn't have to face the ultimate rejection of caregiver that Ennis knew he did, and abandonment.
And so, yeah.
Is that why he like, is more open to like kind of hooking up with other guys, or he has that guy at the end where he's like going to bring him back to the farm too? Like he seems more open to exploring other relationships.
Yep. That is a big part of it. I mean, that might just be personality traits too, but to to see him bloom more, and that he speaks more clearly and openly and is more optimistic. All of those things are factors of someone who's actualized more and has more safety to do so, whereas Ennis has had to survive and learn the world is very unsafe and the world will kill you if you do not conform. And Jack gets taught that lesson as he gets older and learns that like maybe things are more complicated than he thought.
I was gonna say, and I think too, when you're raised by caregivers who their love and affection for you is conditional, like only if you are XYZ or only if you behave XYZ type of ways, you also start, your love for yourself gets very conditional. And so then your ability to believe if you're a good person or not is very dependent upon how you behave and how you present. And you might even just think that you're not a good person, or you don't have that foundational belief that I'm a good person no matter what. And so I think kind of a side effect of that, or an offshoot of that, is that Ennis doesn't believe that his needs, his like sexual romantic needs, deserve to be met. And I think Jack does, which is why he keeps saying like, we deserve this. Like, aren't we allowed to have this? I think that's why he pursues alternative relationships, like going to Mexico, maybe taking the David Harbour character up on his offer. Cause I'm assuming that's who it is that he's talking about. Me with too. the rancher that he's colluding with.
Yeah, and so I need to see that sequel. I need to see that sequel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
David Harbour. Ooh, okay.
Agreed.
And so I think that's also why kind of your question, Patrick, of why I think Jack pursues things that way is I think he believes that he deserves to get those needs met. He deserves to go down. Like he kind of says, like, what does it matter if I go down to Mexico? I'm allowed to go down to Mexico and look for somebody. Like, fuck you. Like, because he believes that he deserves that. And so that when I work with adults who have gone through trauma or just, well, having bad parents is traumatizing. Part of that work is like, you are allowed to ask for the things that you need and the things that you want, and you are allowed to center yourself. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling. And that has to be like a learned feeling that you usually do in therapy to get through that. And I think that is a huge difference in why we don't see Ennis ever pursue anything else like romantically with another man or sexually with another man. Is that, why would he? What is that? That's neither here nor there. Like, that's kind of how he puts it. Like when Jack kind of pushes him, he's always like, what are you talking about? Like, it's us being gay is neither here nor there. Like, it doesn't matter, because for him, it doesn't matter, or it's not supposed to matter. And so I think Jack is the one exception to this rule. Jack happened to him.
Jack did happen to him. And like, I think your thing with that my needs deserve to be met. It's not just that they deserve to be met. It's that he expects them to be met.
It's true too. Which also why he's a bit more of a complainer than Ennis. Like Ennis is very like head down, like I'll take what I can get. And Jack's always whining. I mean, no offense. He's probably complaining about real equitable things, but he's always like, my dad this, and Aguilar's such a douche. Like he's like in the beginning of the movie, he's always thinking I deserve more. Like I want more. We should be treated better. And Ennis is very like, I'll take what I can get. I don't want to be too loud or cause too much of a scene, all that kind of stuff.
Because
Ennis, a good point though about the like thinking you deserve something. Cause like a lot of gay people in pop culture are not depicted as like deserving of pleasure, like, you know, of like sexual pleasure. Like even the sex scene in this movie, the tent with the spit and all that, it's like primal. It's like animalistic. It's not like, it didn't seem pleasurable to me to like have that sex with like spit lube, like with nothing, no foreplay. I mean, come on guys. Like, talking about like gay people deserving pleasure, I think that just deserves to be repeated. And I think if you are listening to this podcast and you are gay and you're like feeling ashamed about your sex and sexuality or having sex, like you do deserve to have pleasure in your life. And I think that's a really good thing to just shout from the rooftops, you know?
Shout it loud.
And not just pleasure, but like softness and tenderness. Like I was really glad that because I've only seen this movie once when it first came out, so I couldn't remember a lot of details. But I was really glad in their like sort of second night together, like intimate night, that it was very tender. Like he lays on his chest. It's more like sweet and like slow making out, and like that all their like sexuality together wasn't demonstrated in that like weirdly uber manly, aggressive, rough. I also went, what? That's not enough. Like licked his hand and brought down. I was like, no. Like, oh, I gasped aloud. I was like, but yeah. And because even like you're saying, like when they kiss in front of their house with Alma, like they almost broke each other's noses. I understand that they are taking it out on each other, unfortunately, because they are put in a horrible position societally. And I'm glad that they did make a point, Ang Lee made a point of showing a lot of tenderness and softness between them. And for me, like I said, that felt like who they truly would have been towards each other if they would have been able to meet in a safe way in an inclusive world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the only other way, and I feel like we've talked about it in a couple different ways already, but what I feel like what we're really seeing is someone who has secure attachment and someone who doesn't.
Say it louder, because all the TikTok girlies are talking about attachment styles. So,
oh God. I hope that they're,
and I just like
looking it up.
Just TikTok mental health facts, and like I'm gonna sound like the oldest man here, but like
you got that
sometimes these pseudo mental health professionals like naming these mental health facts and just spouting pure bullshit is so harmful to actual mental health. It drives me insane and I hate it. Like the people that are doing it with some like knowledge and some education, but people are like, I'm 19, I'm a relationship coach, and you should pay me $250 because here's 10 facts about relationships. No.
Well, what I can say right now is that we have a TikTok. And so if you wanted something based in true information, you can find us on TikTok, and we are a resource for actual information. Hannah, if you could like briefly describe like when you say secure attachment, what does that mean?
Secure attachment is essentially what secure attachment means is that you have been able to experience having someone who is there no matter what. So this is what secure attachment style refers to: the ability to form secure, loving relationships with others. A securely attached person can trust others and be trusted, love and accept love, and get close to others with relative ease. There are other forms of it. I
agree with that definition of secure attachment. And you're right.
Me too.
That's what Jack sounds like. He sounds like someone who's securely attached. Even like his relationship with Lorene, which what a name. I'm assuming Texas name.
Terrible.
He seems pretty maybe I shouldn't say this. He seems like he's ready to leave her at the drop of a hat, him and his kid, which I don't love. That it's not a good look for. He does seem like they've kind of made a relationship that sort of works for them. And he seems like he's not strained the way that Ennis and Alma are strained. But also I would argue that Alma and Lorene are very different women who have very different needs in the way that they're portrayed. I mean, they're only really portrayed through their connection to these two male characters. But yeah.
Well, and Anne Hathaway totally knows that Jack's gay, right? I mean, she 100% knows. And that's, not to get all philosophical, you guys are rubbing off on me. Okay, maybe I'm going to be like one of these TikTok people and make a psychology channel. But from my vantage point, it's kind of interesting that she knows, but just as long as he doesn't say it, just like his parents, like Ben was saying. So don't ask, don't tell applies to that relationship too. Weird. That's so weird. Is this what your job is like? You're just making connections and you're like, oh my God.
Yep. It's my brain is like one of those true crime poster boards, like walls where like the red strings are attaching to everything. That's a lot of what therapy can be sometimes. It's like, string here, string there.
Like, your brains are like not like mine. Mine's like, oh, what's over there? A squirrel.
Well, we're also a bit of that, which is why
you're training me. And that's why I love your podcast, because it's making me think in ways that I don't think, because I don't like to really like wrinkle my forehead, and like my Botox won't let me do that. But I love all the factoids I'm learning here today.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, this is going to feel like it's out of context, but I want to say it anyway. I don't really care. We are going to be doing an episode soon with the Mental Health Avengers, where we're going to be talking about TikTok and information. And so if you're interested, look for that to come out. We'll be posting it where we're actually going to be talking about that with all the other professionals that are with Mental Health Avengers. But
I'm gonna old man so hard.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
What's TikTok? How do I log.com?
Well, and part of what I've been thinking about and trying to, think about it, like in terms of why do people use that? Because we don't have mental health education in this country, which, I talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. And that any way that they can get it, and that it's like that soundbite piece. And that, as always, the most important thing is that you need to see if that person is actually a therapist. Just like a book, when you read those self-help books, if it's written by somebody who doesn't have any special letters next to their name, they are not fucking qualified to say shit.
That's what I was going to say. See if they have letters after their name, and then Google what those letters mean, because you can get a certificate online, and then you can
pretty much put anything
letters behind your name that are based on that certificate.
Oh yeah, I'm a reverend from Universal Life Church. Okay,
me too.
Same.
Praise be to you.
I do weddings.
Same.
Only for my friends. Only for my friends.
I would say, kind of jumping back to Lorene, I'm just purely speculating now. I think we see right from jump that she is I'm going to use this word. It's such a euphemism. She's a more worldly person. I know that's an old school euphemism for slutty, which is not what I mean even. I truly mean it. Like, she's from a bigger city. She's from a family that has a lot of resources. She is very sexually confident, and she pursues Jack, and she has sex with him right away. Like, she seems very secure in herself. And also she travels, she does her own thing, she works. So I think her worldview is more diversified. And I wouldn't be surprised if she's run into maybe a decent number of gay men along her life. And it's just kind of like, some men just like the company of other men every once in a while. And she's got so much of her own thing going on that I think that probably makes it, quote unquote, easier for her to live with her relationship with Jack. Also, she seems like a woman, and I mean this as a compliment, she seems like a woman who might have her own lovers on the side too. And they might have a whole don't ask, don't tell policy within their whole relationship.
Which I feel like would make a lot of sense. And also at that time too, like having a partner who is okay with her being the breadwinner in 1,000 different ways. Like during that time, that really wasn't something that was manly. If we're talking about, the masculinity piece in this film, not traditional. And so also that being a part of, I wonder if that's a part of why they were together, because for Jack, he's like, I don't care. That's not because he is engaging in this relationship because it's what he's expected to do.
And it allows him to pursue his other interests.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I had a different take on her. I think, not that I think you guys are wrong, just I interpreted differently. I think it was left ambiguous on purpose. And my take on her is that she loved business. She loved... Oh,
business was her first love.
She loved the business, and she didn't care what he was doing because she didn't need him because she's so secure. But I didn't take that she knew he was gay. I took that it just didn't occur to her. It
didn't matter.
It didn't matter. He didn't matter. Like, if he was there to be a husband that was handsome and provided optics and provided her babies, and
he was the best salesman.
Right. Did something the best that couldn't be disputed and was energetic and smiled and talked, that she didn't care. Mm-hmm. And she very well may have had, people who could provide her sexual needs on the side. I mean, that tracks. But I think for me, the way I saw it is that it just didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a concern to her. She didn't care. Like, every time we see her, she is focused 100% on the business and 0% on him. Mm-hmm. He was an afterthought. So whatever he went to do.
The deleted scene of Anne Hathaway and Romeo and Michelle all getting the business lady special in their suits,
Oh my God, that's a movie we could do on this podcast.
I would love to hear your thoughts about Romeo and Michelle.
I don't even think it's on our big spreadsheet.
Is it not? Are you sure?
I don't think it is, girl.
I'm going to write it down.
We have this gigantic spreadsheet of all the movies we want to do. We're going to die and we're going to will this spreadsheet
to someone else
because we'll never get to the end of it.
I'll have to get Padawans.
Yeah.
But
do I get a Robin?
What do you mean? Is this a reference? I don't know.
Batman.
Oh, Okay.
Batman girl. It's all about Batman.
A little orphan boy who lives in your home and you take care of.
Train him to beat someone's ass. Yeah, no. No, but
yeah.
I mean, just think, we haven't even talked about how the best Joker is in this movie yet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you already had two of your own. You've already had like 2 to 3 Batman references. Well, Are you never satisfied?
With Batman? Is Batman ever satisfied?
Ugh, let's not get into that. No, but I think too, what we also haven't mentioned is his father-in-law, Lorene's dad, that's probably the most specific way we see masculinity kind of pushed on Jack's character is this dad, but he's just kind of a narcissistic douche. Like, I don't even know if it's really like a masculinity thing. I just think he needs to be like top dog. Like when he gets introduced to the baby, he immediately says, "It looks like me," right? Like undermining Jack's position as the father.
His wife. Looks like his wife.
Oh, okay. And then
weird.
We said no. So he said spitting image of your grandpa.
He says both. He says grandma first, and then he says, and he looks like me.
Mm-hmm.
But he minimizes Jack every chance he gets. He just emasculates him every second he gets.
It's like he rubs his face in the carpet every chance he gets.
And
it's
then
a real prick.
And then the scene with the TV scene, which that was so stupid. Men, no offense, I'm judging you guys as a group. So dumb.
That's fair. We're the worst.
Like the carving the turkey, that always is really funny to me, is like a sign of like whose head dog is who's carving the bird at the thing. And then when that
is a thing.
When I know it's a thing. I just said it's dumb.
Well, it is, but it's a thing.
When the father-in-law gets up to turn the TV back on, I was like, we're really going to do this? This is so embarrassing and stupid. But I think what says a lot about Lorene is when Jack finally yells at him, she almost laughs.
Yeah.
She smiles like, like I think she also doesn't give a shit about her dad because her dad is obviously more traditional, quote unquote. And so I think she likes to be rebellious, obviously. I think we see that from right away with her. And so I think Jack got lucky in that he ended up with a woman who, in her own way, spurns traditional roles, gender roles, and therefore is probably satisfied to have a husband who doesn't challenge her either. And then the way that she didn't marry her dad. And I feel like she made a conscious decision to not marry her dad.
And she seems happy. Like she seems content versus how we see Alma and Keith. Neither one of them seems content in any way, right? And she seems chill. Like we don't see her be super angry. We don't see her yelling at him. We don't really see them arguing. There's a lot of things that we don't see. So it's kind of, and also that it feels like they have some affection for each other in general, in some way, just like her smile. I feel like her smirk really indicated that when that was happening. But the audacity of that old white man who got up and went back the second time, I was like, how long are you going to make everybody wait to eat food, you fucking pricks? Get it together.
I mean, it's the definition of a dick measuring contest, and Jack needed to show him that he was the biggest dick in the room and that he needed to sit his old shriveled ass down. And he had to take his place as top dog in the family, or that dad would have never respected him ever, because he was just letting him bully. And Jack had to do that. And that is, a thing about the culture of men, and men are the worst in groups. Men are the worst. We're the worst. We just are. It's fine. It's not, but it is what it is. We hadn't talked about this. I talked about it in the beginning in a off mic. Homophobia is not the fear of gay men. It's not the fear of being gay. It's not the fear of your sexuality. It's not the fear of another man touching you. It's the fear of how other men in society will react to you and reject you from your status as being accepted and being in, which then therefore becomes dangerous to you because you become a target. And this movie illustrates that extremely well with looking at the difference between how these two men operate the world, where one knows it and the other doesn't, because the other has always been in the in-group, and the other learned very quickly, you get outside of these bounds, you're dead. Realistically, like by that definition, we see that Ennis is much more homophobic than Jack, because Ennis views other men as a danger, and Jack thinks he's king shit.
Well, yeah, because you see, like Like that's also part of the why of Jack like approaches men. Like he approaches that guy in that bar, which that could have been like Ennis would have truly rather died than do that. Like, and I think it's because that was I felt nervous for Jack when he was approaching that man, because I was like, this isn't a gay bar, like, or even like an underground unspoken gay bar. Like this is a regular schmegular bar. And so he really took a risk there in a way that, you're right, Ben, like he feels secure, or he's not homophobic the way that Ennis has internalized homophobia. Yeah. I mean, it's part of like we've talked about with like Jack feels like he deserves to get those needs met, but I think he also feels this space to the freedom to get those needs met.
And he does. And I think it's really important that we recognize that like the human body has nerve endings. And if someone stimulates nerve endings in a pleasurable way, it's going to feel good. And it doesn't matter necessarily who's doing it. So like, the Kinsey scale exists for a reason. Some people are at one end of it, some people the other, but lots of people, the Kinsey scale goes from 0 to 6, where you're either like into the same sex or into the opposite sex, but it is a gradient scale. Not everybody is at the extreme end of it. Most people aren't. Mm-hmm. And I think like the idea that homophobia is the fear of your nerve endings being stimulated by someone who happens to have the same parts as you is biological nonsense. And we have seen throughout time that human beings will have pleasurable touching with whoever's around when it's convenient. And to understand more so that the societal boundaries that are established become what create the fear. And it's not who touches you where or who wants to touch you where.
And that's why when people are like, when like I talk to usually older people and they're like, it must be a trend because there's so many more gay people than there used to be, or there's so many more trans people than there used to be. It's like, they were always there, baby. Like they just didn't have the freedom or the safety or the security to let them know. Like if we were able to be whoever we wanted to be, it would be interesting, kind of what you're saying, Ben, how many of us where we would fall on the sexual fluidity scale, and how much that would just be free flowing. And just that, like we are, like there are other animals that have the gay tendencies. I'm going to put it like that. Like it's not this like social construct trend that we are creating societally.
No,
as we're getting more woke and progressive and liberal or whatever.
Right. And it's none of that. It's that it's exactly what you said. It's becoming safer to do so, that it's not associated with death, beatings, being tied to a post, or, I used to live in Boys Town, and if you walk down North Halstead Street, you see all of these beautiful gold pillars with rainbows on them. And many of them are dedicated to people who came out as gay, had a huge impact on the world, but most of them also met tragic ends due to this homophobia and were murdered for being gay, which is insane. It's just ridiculous that because you like a certain type of person to get you off, that's enough reason that other people should kill you.
Well, it's what you're saying. It's more like fear of being the other. Fear of being othered by the in-group. That's just what it is.
And what oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I was going to cite the article that I read in grad school that I think everybody should read. It's Masculinity as Homophobia, Fear, Shame, and Silence in the Construction of Gender Identity by Michael S. Kimmel. That's where those ideas come from, and that eye-opening revelation that it's not about who's going to touch you or who's not going to touch you. Like that's not the fear. The fear is being cast out by other men. And harmed. And understanding that is a critical component of understanding that if that fear of being cast out by other men weren't there, that human beings would do a lot more things with a lot more people that look a lot of different ways with no shame.
Were you going to say something, Patrick?
Ben, you mentioned measuring dicks. Did I miss a scene in the movie? Was there a full frontal with Jake Gyllenhaal that I missed?
There was, and you should probably just go back and watch it again and see if they, use the tape measures correctly.
Okay. If you pause it just right, you can see his penis.
Well,
that's from Scream. That's from Scream. When they talk about Tom Cruise's penis in Risky Business, I think.
Well, I'm all for the frontal nudity, and I'm all for straight men talking about homophobia and stuff like that, it's so important to talk about that, because the thing on the gay side of things, we're always like, oh, if they're homophobic, they're probably gay, like whatever, they're just into me. But no, it does make sense that it would be like a man like inclusion thing, like not wanting to be the outsider or the person getting bullied, because gays and bullies are like, I don't know, peas and carrots.
Like the movie Moonlight is a classic example of how, as that main character gets older and sexuality becomes more of a part of development, how he gets more and more excluded and bullied by the in-group, because in that movie, everyone kind of clocks him like early and often as being gay.
Yeah.
And so he can't hide it the way that the men in this movie do a pretty decent job of hiding it. And so you're right. Like, and he gets, that movie's hard for me to watch. He gets so painfully bullied and ostracized until he adopts toxic masculinity.
I can relate to that for sure. Like, I'm obviously a gay person, a gay man, not able to hide it. So I remember those middle school days. They were tough, and like they still are tough, I think, for a lot of kids out there. I'm working right now as part of like trainee for Trevor Project.
Oh, cool.
I'm doing like, I guess, risk aversion or something. Like, they call into the hotline and I try to like talk to them and like be empathetic and just be like, it's going to be cool. Don't worry. So there are resources out there for people who are getting bullied now that I think weren't necessarily there.
For people who don't know, can you tell them a little bit about what the Trevor Project is? Because that's a great resource that I definitely want to highlight, especially now we got somebody who's willing to dedicate their time to it, because it's amazing.
Yeah, so it's basically a hotline, a chat service, and also a social media platform called Trevor Project, which focuses on ending suicide for LGBTQ youth. And you would think, oh, a kid being suicidal, that's crazy. That's not true. But like, no, it is. And like the calls that are sometimes tough to hear, and not everybody, like not all of their calls are like that, but it can be like someone in crisis, basically a youth in crisis, which can mean something different to every person. And then we're just kind of there to take the call and kind of help them through the crisis and de-escalate the situation to hopefully get them to a point where they could talk to people like you guys.
Good. That's great.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, because I think our listeners who might be drawn to this episode definitely need to know that resource is there, and there are people who are going to understand your story, that are there to listen to you and help you, and that there's options.
Yeah, and Lady Gaga likes Trevor Project. So if you need an endorsement, Lady Gaga likes it. So.
And I think we follow them. I've definitely shared I run our Instagram. I've definitely shared Trevor Project's like resources on there. So if you're having a weird time finding them, if you're friends with us on Instagram, if you go to our following, they're there as well. But like you said, it's just the Trevor Project.
Yeah, that's the first Google search. There's no other Trevor Project. So
yeah. And I would say too, kind of what made me think as well in talking about like the bullying aspect is there's so much aggression in this movie. We kind of referenced it between Ennis and Jack. Like it really broke my heart. They all break my heart, but like their last day on Brokeback together, and then they start like wrestling, like play fighting, and then it becomes like real fighting, and then they're like really hurting each other. And there's a few moments in the movie where they do get aggressively physical with each other, not in like a sexual way, but like in a truly like hurting each other way. And I think that's also where that internalized homophobia comes up, of just like, even Ennis kind of says it like, I'm this way because of you, Jack, like you made me gay. And so I think there is also that like anger that they put towards each other of like, you are making this my problem because you're bringing up these feelings within me. Like, how dare you? And because they also can't deal with these intense feelings they have for each other, like they're siphoning it through anger towards each other. But I think what I don't love about it is I think it kind of tells more of a romantic story about treating, like how that blends in with the romance of like, you still shouldn't like punch each other in the face. And even if you're two dudes, that doesn't mean that you should be, if you can take a punch from each other, doesn't mean that you should take a punch from each other.
Yeah.
And so I think as much as this, like you were saying earlier, Patrick, as much as this movie is like, it's good to have like a gay love story. It's also such a shame that it still includes such violence between them, and getting to a place where, which I think we're having more and more. Like I keep hearing about that Heartstopper show on Netflix. I need to watch it, but I heard it's a very lovely, sweet, like teen, like gay romance. It's right up my alley. I need to watch it.
We'll see. Hopefully. And Fire Island's coming out. With
I'm so
Yang,
excited.
So,
I'm so excited for that.
So much more representation, because representation is so important. And I almost said TV movies because I'm so used to talking about it in TV movies.
And that's most of what we watch anyway now. So,
right, yeah. But even at Lifetime, they did a gay Christmas one with Fran Drescher was the mom, and it was awesome. I loved it so much. So yeah, there's positive, but I think Brokeback Mountain is definitely should be canon for gay cinema. It is an important story and an important time period to remember, because if you're growing up gay now, like thankfully most people can't even fathom what that would be like to like have to go your whole life, like not just your awkward teen years or your coming out phase, like your adult life being in the closet, and that's just so heartbreaking to see, but important to remember those times.
So is there anything else we want to speak on before we move to treatment?
I don't think so. I think this is a good spot for us to take a quick break.
Okay, so with treatment, I know, Patrick, we warned you that like treatment can be whatever you want. I know you kind of already mentioned the Trevor Project, which is a good like supplemental treatment thing. Are there any other things that come to mind for you, or any other resources or anything like that that could be good to know?
Well, you are all the professionals. I will just say self-care, if you have any things you like to do, like a face mask, like I did a face mask before the podcast today, just to get ready and centered. Whatever makes you feel good and happy, do that. And if you need to take a break, if you're watching the movie and it's too much, or if anything's too much, just take a break from it. Just walk away for a walk, whatever you need to do. But I'll let you guys do the treatment because you're the professionals. So mine is more beauty tips and cooking recipes.
Very Lifetime.
All of which are grounding activities, though, that bring you back to be centered in the moment, where you are safe, you're in your environment, and you're not imagining 1,000 possible realities. So don't disparage that. That is self-care is treatment, and it's a huge component of it.
Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely.
One more step to my what is it called? Psychology degree?
Your life coaching certificate?
Oh God, my TikTok channel.
Please don't get one of those.
I won't.
I would say this isn't really necessarily, I guess it is treatment in a way. And we kind of talked about this already, but what I was thinking about when I was thinking about treatment to bring into this episode today was for like Ennis specifically, how in order for someone like Ennis to participate in therapy and be able to fully engage in therapy, he has to be in an environment in which he feels safe and secure and has those resources. I think we get ahead of ourselves societally because we don't like to think about messy stuff, quote unquote. And so we'll be like, why can't that person just get out of that situation that they're in? And so one thing we have to be mindful of all the time as therapists is when someone comes into our office, we have to make sure that they are like, the way you can think of it is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think if you take Psych 101, that's one of the few things you learn, which is this idea of, it's like a pyramid, like the food pyramid. But it's this idea that you have to move up that pyramid psychologically. And so you have to cross basically the bottom rung off the list before you can move up. And so the bottom part of that pyramid is safety, like shelter, food, clothing, safety, like physical safety. And that until you can get those things accomplished or handled, you can't really ask people to go higher on that pyramid, which includes like relationships and employment and self-actualization and stuff like that. And so I think where people can get things wrong, or where I hope therapists are not getting this wrong, is that someone comes into your office like this and you're going straight to, well, use I feel statements, use grounding techniques, like just tell people who you are, live more authentically, listen to your true self. That's not possible in the environment that Ennis is in. And that's an impossible ask. You're jumping ahead, way ahead, like stratospherically ahead of him by going there first. When you work with someone who is in I'm just going to say marginalized community, for lack of a better way of putting it, you have to be mindful of their the environment first? Are you in a space where you are safe? And so it would be for Ennis, like the conversations I might have with him first as a therapist is like, do we need to move? Like, do you need to move? Like, do you need to be somewhere different? Do you need to try to do a different line of work? What resources would be for that? Can you even do that? Because he only has 1 year. Like when we would talk about getting your GED, maybe like you would talk about more concrete life things first, while maybe simultaneously also teaching what you're referencing, Patrick, like grounding techniques and these other more like abstract psychological coping skills. But you can't ignore the real life world that lives around him. And you can't be ignorantly optimistic or like toxic positivity you just have to be yourself and like all that stupid shit. Like you really have to be realistic first. And so that's what I'll ask people when I talk to them. I'll be like, do you think this is possible where you are right now? Can you do this? Like, help me understand your line for your own personal life, what you're wanting out of your life, and then what you feel like is possible right now for you. And you have to let your client dictate where that line is and where they're ready to make moves too. Because with someone like Ennis, he's so scared. Like this whole movie, he's so scared. And so you really have to be respectful of where he's at, where his tolerance level with making change. And he might be someone that if he were to come to therapy, you might spend years where minute changes happen. And like progress is measured in millimeters, not in like big movements. And that's okay because also Ennis would have to trust me as a therapist. He'd have to trust that if him even just maybe even admitting that he has gay tendencies, like I don't even think he would necessarily say like I'm gay, but like getting him to a pot of even like insinuating that possibly he has had sexual feelings, romantic feelings towards a guy, that alone would be a huge breakthrough in his work with me. And in trusting me and our relationship and the confidentiality I'll provide for him. And that would be something that would in itself might take, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to say months, maybe years of working together before we would get to there. And so I think it's just being mindful as the clinician that you have to meet your clients where they're at. You also have to be mindful of the environments that they're in and that they can't always move freely within those environments. People can't just get out of homophobic environments sometimes or get out of like their hometown. Like you have to try to keep them safe and get their needs met as much as you can within the environment that they might have to stay in for a while. And so that's when you'd bring in, like you mentioned, Patrick, like outside resources that are more safe. Like you can call this number because there's no one in your life, your immediate life, who you could call because they aren't safe to talk to. And so it's more like establishing and also helping them establish community if they feel even safe to do that. So doing things like in Chicago, there's like the Center on Halsted, like when I've worked with LGBTQ youth and things like that, like that'd be a place I would direct them to, like a place to find community and therefore further resources. And so you have to be really, you can't just go straight into like individual psychology when you do, and then therapy, when you do this work with people who are in marginalized communities, where especially in people where they feel unsafe. Like this would also apply to people going through abusive relationships and like domestic violence of like, we have to meet them where they're at. And from the outside perspective, it might seem like we're going too slow as clinicians, or we're like enabling them to stay within environments that are unhealthy. Like the person in front of you, your client has to dictate the speed, like barring like genuine, like, I think you're going to be killed tomorrow. You really can't pull the trigger on like stuff like that with clients. You have to let them go at their own pace, as long as barring like extreme, like harm concerns. That's my those are just my thoughts on treatment working with someone like Ennis.
Do you want to go next? Or you want me to go next?
Whichever way you want to go, Hannah. If you got a night.
You go. I got nothing. You go. I'll think about it for a minute.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to have a bingo square for Ben Encourages Hannah outwardly. And it's that you never have nothing. You're a wonderful therapist and you are always a great friend. And you're a gentleman and a scholar as well. And that you're always insightful and you always have something. So I don't want to hear you disparaging yourself. And our listeners love you probably best of all of us. So
not if I can help it. Just joke.
Thank you, Ben. And Brittany.
But I'm happy to go. I mean, when I look at Ennis is the quintessential perfect example of someone who needs EMDR therapy. Just there is never been a more perfect example other than Wanda Maximoff, who needs EMDR therapy. And when I look at the way he reacts to things, the way he's so shut down, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I know that I talk about it a lot and that I'm definitely a disciple of it. I'm not one who thinks that EMDR is the only tool in the world, and I definitely blend tools and use EMDR as one of the tools in my toolbox, not like I use EMDR, I don't need EMDR, because I have problems with that. But looking at Ennis, a type of therapy that doesn't require him to talk as much is going to be really important, because he gets uncomfortable talking. And with EMDR, a lot of it is a somatic process where you focus on what people are feeling in their body while they focus on the images that are distressing in their mind and help blend together the functions of their left and right side of their brains so that they can recognize, I am safe, my body is calm, and that when I think about this old image of this poor man who got dragged by his junk to his death and beaten with tire irons, that I can stop seeing that image in my head and think it's going to happen to me now. Every time I think about it, it can help you realize that that is something that happened. It is not happening every second of every day, that is a risk that someone is there to beat down your door. And we see it being so relevant in his life that even when Lorene tells him what happens to Jack, he interjects his own mental narrative of Jack getting beaten to death with a tire iron. We don't know if that happened or not, or if what Lorene said was the truth. They left that ambiguous on purpose. But what we do see is that's immediately where his mind goes. And that's representative of what a traumatized brain is going to do. It's like the way I've been describing it to clients is we have a matrix in our mind, and not necessarily a matrix like the movie, but more like a matrix in math, but also like the movie, where you have an ability to combine the details of every story you've ever heard, ever lived, and ever encountered in any way. And you can combine those details in any random pattern and imagine that happening. And if you ever have any doubt of that, just remember that the brain of Stephen King exists, and all of those stories that he wrote, all of fucked up things, were things he made up in his mind.
I love him.
From details he combined. And human beings, every one of us can do that. And I always think of Han Solo and Princess Leia talking about, well, how much reward are you going to get? Well, more wealth than you can imagine. I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit. And I always think of that when I think of how this trauma matrix works in our head, is that you can combine endless bad details into a picture that plays in your head of what might happen, and your body will respond in an adaptive way to the reality it's perceiving at the moment. That happens through dissociation. So you dissociate away from the present, away from whatever safety you're in your own house, your own trailer like Ennis, wherever you are, into a reality where you are unsafe, and your body starts reacting to it immediately. And what EMDR helps to do is bring you concretely back by disrupting that dissociation, by adding what's called a bilateral stimulation, either through eye movements, through tapping on either side of the body, or through beeps on either ear, that cause your attention to shift back from left brain to right brain, while grounding you in the present moment you are in, so that your ability to dissociate into the matrix is disrupted, and you're thinking about the distressing image while also realizing you are safe. And I think for Ennis, that is a process that he would need, because this foundational trauma narrative that he runs constantly is, I will be that guy. I will be dragged by my penis with a rope after being beaten with hammers until I bleed to death and left in a crevice in a ravine. That's fucked up. If that's the foundational reality he believes, if I'm discovered as gay, that's what's going to happen to me. He's never, ever, ever going to let that out. And he's going to stay shut down and be this stone-faced wooden existence of this frozen part of his personality that he operates in, because that part of him tells him he has that choice to be safe and nothing else. So for me, doing EMDR therapy with Ennis would be exactly where I'd want to go. And given that he's our surviving character, he is absolutely my choice. And that's why.
Okay. Hannah?
I think that, Ben, what you were saying about Ennis, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think EMDR would absolutely be a thing that would work for him, and would be something as someone, which I think I've talked about on the podcast before, that I do EMDR with my therapist on a pretty regular basis, and how there really isn't anything like it. It's definitely has, as someone who has a really long trauma history, there really isn't anything else. That's probably the one thing that I can point to the most often that helps remind me that I'm safe, and all those other good pieces. So I think that makes a lot of sense for him. I have been sitting here thinking about, what about his kids? What about those babies? Part of what I was wondering, there's a couple of different thoughts that I've had as hearing both of you talk about treatment. And so one of them is, when we did Call Me By Your Name, the way that we're kind of talking about, I think at some point we ended up talking about what treatment would be like for Oliver if he had finally accepted in his life that he was gay. And what that might be like for him. And so I feel like as we've been talking about Ennis a lot, I feel like that a part of that, I think, would definitely, like, they seem similar in that way, in terms of being able to accept that about themselves, and that's the biggest thing that they need. I mean, Ennis needs more trauma therapy as well. Anyway, so that was one thing that I was just randomly thinking about, but really thinking about the daughter. So which one is the daughter that he has the relationship with, Ennis?
Alma Jr.
Alma Jr. That's a horrible name. I hate it so much. Okay.
That's Kate Mara.
Yeah. So I have really just been thinking about, but I was really thinking about what it would be like as she gets older and learns more about herself, and maybe it might be something where a therapist would say, and of course, only if appropriate, and before we're doing all the things that Brittany already talked about, if we don't meet people where they are, they won't stay. And they'll find somebody else who will meet them where they are. I feel like she would be the one who would, sometimes when people are in therapy, a part of it can be, do you want to bring someone in? Do you want to have a session with someone? And I've done that before. I've done that with a couple of different sets of clients where where we've really talked about it and made a plan. And I really explained to them what has to be the kind of how it goes, which I can actually talk about a little bit because that might be helpful. But it just really made me think of, what would I do with Ennis, who's like maybe like in his like 60s? Because we would have to imagine that she would have to probably be in her 30s. That would kind of be my guess. And what would it be like to have them in my office, and kind of like she wants to reconnect. Like she wants to have a different kind of relationship with him, because the one that she has, I think, works as much as it can, but that I think it's clear that she wants more than that from him, which would make sense for any child who had Ennis as a father, because he's so shut down and so traumatized and is essentially in fucking survival mode most of his life, that she would want that. And that it might be something that, you know, one of the things that I talk about whenever someone asks me that or suggests it, I usually don't suggest that, but I usually, especially because my very first therapist was like, "Oh, do you want to bring your dad in?" And I was like, "Fuck no, I'll never be in a fucking room with that fucking asshole." Blah 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 blah. Which is very like me, and should not be a surprise to anyone. But usually when people ask me that question, I say, well, you know, the first thing always is, what do you want to get out of this?
Yeah.
Like, what is your hope for this? Because having them in this room is not going to magically change who they are.
Yes.
And also, if you want to have them in my office, there's a couple of different ways that I do that. One is I'll have a session with that person by themselves, with the parent. So like, I'm thinking Kate Mara comes to me and I've been seeing her for a while, and she's like, I really would like to have my dad come in because it's really hard to reach him. And I feel like I've done all the things. I've tried all the things. I'm like, okay, well, here's some of if your dad would be interested, I could see him individually first and then see you together, or just see you together. But this is how it's going to go. What I'm going to do is lay out a structure of this is what we're hoping for in the session. I am in charge of the session. If anything goes off track, I will be the one who will be handling that. This is not a room where we will be yelling at each other. That is not what this is for. Now, if you need to pause or take a break or you need a drink, just let me know and we can make that's a part of the plan. But it also very much is helping. It would be me helping Kate really understand we don't have control of other people's healing. And even though we may really want something from them, it doesn't mean that they can give that to us. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that we don't deserve that.
Or we shouldn't be asking them of that.
Or shouldn't be asking. We absolutely should be asking them that. That's on one of the emotional rights. You're allowed to ask for something you need, even if the answer is no. You're still allowed to ask for it. And really helping her understand everybody has their own capability. And your dad might not have the capacity, and that's okay. And also, we can still have a session and just see how it goes. You know, like, is there something like, what do you want to talk about? What are the things you want to say? Really, whenever I do something like that, it's very much led by the client. And I am there really as like this other support. And I also tell them, here's the other piece. If you want me to be able to kind of facilitate this, know that I will have to validate something for them, not against you, but that it will be a little different. A, because everyone should have someone on their side, regardless of the situation, regardless of their existence. And B, because what do we know statistically? What is the most important thing when it comes to therapy? The relationship between the therapist and the client. The fucking worksheets, none of that shit matters. The most important thing is that you feel heard and seen by me. So I really talk to them about how it might feel a little bit different. And I want you to know that a part of that is keeping the space open for both of you. And so I really clarify, I check in, we make a plan. So I feel like me and Kate would make a plan. I'd be like, okay, how about we just talk about some of the happy things that you remember growing up with your dad? You know, it might be something where you just say that to him and say, you know, this really made me feel good when you did this with me, or I really enjoyed this experience that we had, or I was really proud or really excited that you would get a new job to come to my wedding, like, and help him just hear those parts for two reasons. One, because I think if this is something we're going to do, having a basis of, we're going to start out with good things. We're going to start out with the happiest pieces of this so that both of them can remember and be in that space if we're going to do any kind of work together, like if they're going to come more times. I think that would be something that I would do. And then we would just kind of talk about that and like, what was that like for you? And like, Dad, like, do you remember that? What do you remember thinking about that? Or especially since Ben brought up that like the chances are that Dad's probably not going to be super chatty in session. It also could be something where we just play a therapy game where we just ask each other questions. Like I do that with whenever I have a kid client. The first session usually involves the parent, the child, and me. And we just play one of my games. I have it's like Jenga, but with therapy questions. And we would do that. Again, helping people be comfortable in the space. I feel like that's all that I have to say about that. So I'm good.
All right. Let's slip into final thought. But right before that, let's take another break. All right. So final thoughts on Brokeback Mountain. I mean, it's a beautiful movie. It's only the second time I've seen it. It's kind of a slow movie. I think that's like my biggest critique of it is it's like a low and slow movie, which I know is a style of movie that's not quite my style. Like it kind of made me think of like Jane Campion movies, even though I love The Piano, but like The Power of the Dog that recently, has been a big, well, I guess it's also a gay cowboy movie, but like it reminded me of that in the long shots and the big expansive shots. And it's like a movie you just have to kind of like marinate in. So I think it's a beautiful movie. I understand all the accolades it had. I can't get over how young Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger look. And it was making me laugh because it was like they were young people doing impressions of old people. at certain points. Like when they're sitting by the campfire in the beginning, when they're supposed to be pretty young, Heath Ledger's like, I'm doing an old man right now. Like I'm doing an impression of an old man. And it was kind of cracking me up. But other than that, like everyone is impeccable. I've heard really good positive things. Like everyone's accent work, I guess, is really good in this movie, which is always fun. I like looking up dorky things like that on YouTube. No, beautiful movie. Like we've talked about before, I think it touches upon a lot of real topics. It's a good movie that exists. Ang Lee is a beautiful director. And so those are just my final thought. I'll throw it to you, Patrick.
So on my podcast, Lifetime Uncorked, we do pour it up, which means we would recommend, or put a cork in it, which means no thank you. Very simple scale. So this one, of course, I'm going to pour it up for this movie. Gotta pour it up. I was going to say pour it up for straight actors playing gay, but not anymore. But in the time period, I was like, oh my God.
It was very progressive back then.
Whoa, these straight men doing this? Wow. Now we have, gay people playing gay people, which we love. And I just got to say, I can't believe this didn't win Best Picture. I'm still mad that Crash won. It's just absolutely a travesty. This movie should be a Best Picture winner. So people who are going through the list, it should be on the list. But yeah, pour it up for me for sure.
Okay. Hannah?
This is the only second time that I've seen this film. I saw this film maybe like 15 years ago. I saw it once. And I think what I really enjoy, because, a lot of times we watch films as therapists and then we're like, fuck, I can't watch that anymore. Recording this episode today, I feel like I enjoy it more after we've talked about it more, which happens sometimes. So that feels really nice. I think it is a good movie. It's a beautifully shot, really well acted. The only thing is that, they don't look like they're 40. They don't look like they're over the age of 20 the whole fucking time. And Michelle Williams either. And actually all of them all look so baby-faced in this film. But it's pretty sad. So I don't know. I feel like I would watch it again, but it would have to be very intentional.
When you want to cry.
Yeah. But I wouldn't avoid it. Like how other films that I just absolutely abhor would never even consider watching again. This is definitely not one of those films.
Would watch again, everybody.
Whoa, for Hannah.
That is our version of pouring it up, but like a platinum version of that if Hannah will watch a movie again.
Because there's like 7 of them. She watches on a loop.
Pretty much.
All right, Ben, if you want to close us out.
Sure, I'll close us out. So this is also the second time I've seen this movie. I wrote a paper on it for grad school. I remembered, which is odd for me, I remembered almost nothing of it. The movie is beautiful. It's beautifully shot. It's very well done. And I think what sticks out to me the most is the risk these actors took and the way they defeated some pretty shitty narratives. I mean, I'm with you, Patrick, of like, is it that hard to find a gay actor? Really?
Well, an open gay actor at that time.
Say an open an out that time, gay actor.
It was like Elton John and that's it.
Well, famously, there is an interview like in another country, I believe, in which an interviewer was saying some really heinous homophobic shit. And Heath Ledger read him down. Like he was like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I don't know why you're talking to us. Like you are disgusting. Your views are disgusting. And I remember every chat show, even like Oprah Winfrey, they were like, what was it like being two straights kissing each other's mouths? That was so like tantalizing to everybody that these two straight boys would like touch mouths and maybe almost catch gay. Like it, like to think about those questions being asked now feels really wild.
It does. And what I liked about it, like in particular, is looking at these two guys went on to play some of the most iconic, most masculine hero or superhero movie characters that have ever been done. They did not torpedo their career. They took this huge risk and they were gay on screen. And so many people are like, oh, their careers are going to be ruined. It's going to be out. They're going to be terrible. Everybody's going to get typecast for them. And both of them have gone on to have Heath Ledger's career, unfortunately, wasn't much longer after this at this point, but the movies that he did were still very varied. And he played a number of different types of characters. And Jake Gyllenhaal has also shown quite a bit of range and quite a bit of opportunities have been afforded to him to play any number of characters, ranging from art house films to being Mysterio in Spider-Man. I mean, there's so many things. And I think seeing that it didn't destroy them, that they were able to portray this in a way that was believable, that was, you could feel the passion and the love between these two characters, even through the restraint that they had to show. and that these were two straight men, as far as we know, who were portraying these characters, and to see that risk taken and what it means to defeat the ideas of homophobia, that these guys can go out and kiss another man and still play like your favorite heroes and villains. And you'll still love them, and they'll still be seen as men, and nothing needs to be taken away from them because they were that. And like, they did this movie, and I think that is a tremendous leap forward in fighting homophobia. You know, of course, for representation purposes, I think it would have been better that two gay actors get the chance to do this. But, you know, that wasn't, you know, this is almost 20 years ago now. It feels like such a different time. Gay marriage wasn't even legal yet. And the movie as a film was just beautifully written, beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and to have not been as seriously considered for Best Picture as it should have been. Like, Crash was a great film, but I think this stands the test of time better.
You know what is going to destroy Jake Gyllenhaal's reputation? Taylor Nation. Taylor Nation is what's going to be. That's what's going to take.
You got that right.
Jake Gyllenhaal down before this movie will.
Is he dating Taylor Swift?
And we don't have enough time left in this podcast episode to tell you how wrong what you just asked me is.
I have no idea.
You need to watch the 10-minute All Too Well Taylor's version video on YouTube, and also maybe just Google it. I'm sure many girls have made video essays about Jake Gyllenhaal and Taylor Swift.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and say I feel like the woman that the show Bones was about, it went to my high school, so I'm going to just go ahead and quote her. And go, I don't know what that means.
Well, you're going to have to figure it out, bro. So on that note, thank you again, Patrick, for joining us. Yeah. Because at the top, people can find you at Lifetime Uncorked and listen to you do your very funny explanations of Lifetime movies, which are always very grounded in reality.
Right. Yeah. You guys would have a field day with those movies from a psychology standpoint. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm sure they would get. We'd be like eagles with talons, just shredding them.
Oh,
we wouldn't have.
It's very problematic. There's always like a mental, like someone being taken away in a straitjacket and put in a padded cell. So we'll do a swapsies. Do you guys come on my show and break down a Lifetime movie?
I would love to do that. You can pick a good, spicy mental health or like quote unquote oriented one.
Stalked by my doctor, perhaps.
Oh no.
God.
Done and done.
Go ham on it.
All right. Well, as always, you can find us at Popcorn Psychology at Facebook, TikTok, Instagram at popcorn_psych. On Twitter, we have a TeePublic account if you would like to buy any merch of our stuff. We also have a Patreon if you would like to support us. Patrons do get early access to some of our episodes. And if you pledge $50, you can pick the movie we talk about for an episode, which is a pretty big plus, in my opinion. As always, leave us reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. That is the best way for other people to find us. And we read your reviews. So be nice to us because we're sensitive.
And we will shame you if you are mean to us and think we're Trump supporters, which we are not.
That is one of our reviews. Yes. So, and you can also email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. But thank you for joining us and happy Pride.